to look to make sure that button turns red.
All right.
Camera 1. We ready. This is kind of
Sweet. Let's do
jinx a little bit.
that should work. Can they hear me? It's going.
Check. That worked. I almost want to bring the camera. Whatever. Fuck it.
Are you good with that? Yours does look a little
Like further away?
far away.
Yeah.
Although, I mean, or we can just ask for camera 3 if that looks better. Or which one's no camera 1? Oh, it's the top ones too.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at.
So
yeah,
I
it's
will
fine.
say when the AI stuff clips it, it'll be the Instagram reel, so it'll probably look a little bit more close up.
Sweet. Okay.
So
Yeah, I might maybe like a tiny bit.
yeah.
Well, I see why it was back there because now it's in your shot.
Oh, got it. Yeah.
Got it, Josh. I got it. Okay. Yeah, that's probably about as close as it can go.
Yeah. That looks better though. Try sitting.
Yeah, I'm cool with it.
There you go.
I don't want to play with it too much. It's fine. We won't break the fancy equipment, but I'm so excited we're here.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. You know what's nuts is I was trying to think of it yesterday because I came to Warrior Women, which I'm sure we'll talk about at some point, and I got asked, like, how do you know Danielle? I'm like, I have no fucking clue.
Actually, I don't either.
Like, I just feel like we have so many mutual people in common that I just slowly somehow found out about you. Question mark?
Question mark? dot. Yeah, I don't know. I don't. And it's so funny because this is like the origin story for most of my friends. I'm like, yeah, I don't remember how we got connected, but I'm so glad we did.
Yeah.
Does it really matter? I don't know. I
No,
don't think
it
so.
doesn't really. I
That's
mean,
so
I feel
funny,
it was just
though.
like like-minded.
And how do you know Vladi?
I know him. Yep.
Got you. Tiana, Kimmy, got it. Got
Yes.
it.
And
Cool,
then
cool,
I
cool.
know Nikki was the first person that I heard talk about Warrior Women, Nikki Nuremberg, because I actually worked with her back in 2020 because she had worked with one of my friends. So, like, I feel
Maybe
like
that's how we got connected.
I have
Nikki,
no
was
idea.
it you?
But yeah, I feel like, and that's part of why I love Austin so much, right? Like, I'm not even from here, and I have so many multiple connections
it's
that
such a
are
great-
so integrated in such like a like-minded, open, wholehearted kind of community. So, anyways, without getting too off on a tangent with that, speaking of that, like open, wholehearted, like you have this like just radical confidence that you embody. And I remember, I don't even know how long ago on Instagram, I saw you post something about you don't reach that until you're able to meet all parts of yourself. And I've had so many conversations with women around this topic. And often it even comes up of like, well, I feel like I accept myself. Like, are there parts of me that I don't know that I don't know? So what did that part of that journey look like for you? Like, were there parts that you had to kind of discover or rediscover and then work through? And what did that look like?
Yeah. Oh, that's such a great question because there is so much. There are so many parts of ourselves that we just don't know that we don't know yet. And that could be for a number of reasons. We haven't had an experience where we've had to meet that part of ourselves. Like I wouldn't have been able to meet the grieving part of me if my brother didn't pass away.
Yeah.
You know, and so the experience of that has been, it's like having the mindset and the mentality of almost the child, right? Everything is new every single day. And when I approach life in that way, that I am the novice, that I am born again, reborn again. Everything that I experience is a new opportunity to experience it as a new version of me. And I don't think I realized that until the last couple years. We can so easily get so stuck in who it is that we know ourselves to be, which isn't a bad thing at all. That's how we form our identity and how we find our place in the world. And the double-edged sword of that, the flip side of the coin of that is if we become so grounded in who it is that we are, in the sense that we are not willing to open ourselves to newness, I think oftentimes we are blocking ourselves from really beautiful parts that might not have come online yet. It's kind of I guess the metaphor that's coming to mind for me is the tree, the willow tree with deep grounded roots but very flowing branches, right? And I'm not saying to not be grounded in your values and who it is that you know that you are in your integrity, but also allowing some of those belief systems to be fluid and to be inspired by the world around you and the different experiences that you go through. So that's been a lot of my journey the last, I would say, 3.5 years of I know who I am, and a lot of that is shifting and evolving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's such a beautiful thing. And I also want to take time to honor the fact that, so we haven't talked about this, but both of us, it sounds like our journey started with losing a loved one and the deep grief that comes with that. And it's, you don't want anyone else to have that as the catalyst, but it is such a potent reminder, shine light on, like, however you want to phrase it, for like where your priorities really are and what really matters in life versus what doesn't. And so I think it is like this. Did you find that grief also helped you be okay with being more fluid because things really weren't as serious or didn't matter as much as they previous did? Like, does that also hit for you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, grief cracked open so much for me. It was exactly what you said of, wow, look at all these things that I was stressing over, that I was taking so seriously, that I was trying to force into fruition and into reality that really just don't matter. And more so, the importance of my relationships, of saying sorry, of being vulnerable, of wanting to come back to love. Because I was a hard ass, right? I'm all 3 fire signs, rising, moon, and sun. Like, come at me, bro. Like, there was this very hard shell of, I won't let emotions really penetrate through that shell. There was a veil between me and the rest of the world, and it's what helped me feel powerful and helped me feel safe, and many of the reasons why we do what we do. And when I lost Zachary, that shell came crumbling down, and not crumbling down just because that's what happens when you lose somebody, but also there was a willingness to that crumbling. There was a willingness to, because even my brother and I, there's so many deeper levels I wish I would have gotten to with him. And because I had that wall up, because he had his own wall up, there was a depth that we were missing, at least verbally, energetically we carry. And even since his passing, we've continued to build our relationship in a really beautiful way. But there was a willingness for this wall to crumble because I didn't want to miss an opportunity to connect with somebody deeply because I was afraid of feeling feelings or letting somebody see me in my feelings.
Oh, I love that so much. And one thing that I know I've come up against, I'm sure you came up against this, and I know so many people listening to this because I get messages around this on the regular. Because I recently did an episode, a solo one, on holding new boundaries with old friends. And that also translates into just finding out more of who you are and being authentic and having people around you that know a past version. They're like, wait, this isn't you. So what did that look like, both in the standing in your authenticity and in the being okay with letting people go if they were meant to go?
I love that you did that episode. Like, everything about that title just lights me up inside. Setting boundaries, new boundaries with old friends. Yeah, it kind of goes back to this understanding of letting go, letting our identity evolve as we evolve, because we're ever evolving beings. And I think the people who struggle with honoring new boundaries with old friendships, let's say, are the ones that maybe haven't quite digested the idea that we are ever evolving beings, and what has worked for me in the past or has worked for my partner, my friend in the past, might no longer work for them in the future. And for me, it was really understanding, like, if somebody were to set a boundary with me, which last year I had a lot of people set boundaries with me that were really sticky and uncomfortable and felt like abandonment, felt like betrayal, it felt very personal. And I had to really get comfortable with the fact and the understanding that a boundary is not personal. It has nothing to do with me. It has to do with the other person. And one of my favorite quotes that I read are, boundaries are the distance in which I can love you and me at the same time. Whatever that distance might be, and that might be a far-ass distance, that I have to love you and me at the same time. And for me, it's come back to the question of, do I ever want to show up as less than my fullest authentic expression? The answer is no. And do I ever want somebody else to show up as less than their fullest authentic expression so that I am okay? And the answer is no. And Michael Singer, who wrote the book The Untethered Soul.
Oh, I love that book.
Such a great book. And I was lucky enough to live in Gainesville, Florida, where he lives. And so I've seen him speak, and I talk about this a lot on podcasts, or just in life, because he's incredible. But something that really stuck with me, I don't even know if I'm answering your question all the way, so sorry if
that's totally fine. I love it. Keep going.
But the last time I heard him speak, he was talking about the different levels of spirituality. And one of the things that he talked about is how many people will come to him and say, I'm so spiritual, I'm so spiritual. But in actuality, they're spiritual when life is in flow, when quote unquote God is on their side, when they're getting what they want. So they're conditionally spiritual and they're conditionally okay. And what happens if we're conditionally okay is that we're constantly suffering. Because if I'm conditionally okay, I'm going to be working my ass off to manipulate the world around me so that I can stay okay.
Ooh, yeah.
Because the moment that somebody sets a boundary with me, my boyfriend breaks up with me, which happened, right? The moment that somebody passes away, doesn't mean that we don't feel the feelings. But if our whole world and internal guiding system and groundedness is uprooted because life is lifey and shit happens, I'm going to be suffering for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
So to loop this back to grieving and letting those people go, I understood that my identity, the way I was showing up in the world, my communication, my desire for transparency and communication I demanded a lot of people after Zachary passed away, meaning deeper connection, deeper conversation, and not everybody could hold that, and it's okay. And so when I set those boundaries, knowing that it wasn't out of spite, it wasn't out of anger, it was out of love, because I deserve to live freely and express myself freely, and so do you. And if we're not able to do that together, thank you so much for the impact that you've had in my life. I love you, and it's time for us to go our separate ways.
I am borderline obsessed with what you said about if it's not my true authentic expression, it's a no. And if it's not your true authentic expression, it's also a no. Because I think that is so important, because so many times we could go down a giant rabbit hole with societal conditioning and how the vast majority of people show up in a way that's making assumptions about what everyone around them needs and acts in that way.
Yeah.
It's like you ever watch the movie and you see two characters and you can see the individual sides and you're like, if y'all would just
talk.
Stop making assumptions and talk. I will be screaming at a movie and my fiance's like, it's a movie. Calm down. I'm like, yes, but this is people do this in real life. So I love that so much. And that is something that I try more and more to live by every single day.
It's hard.
It
sometimes.
is. It's incredibly hard.
Yeah.
And you get some resistance from other people. You get a lot of resistance from other people when you start living that way. And for anyone that's listening, use this as permission to do exactly that. Stand in your authenticity and open up and allow others to have the conversation of hey, here's what I'm making the assumption of. And I just want to be able to open the floor for what do you actually feel? What's your actual perspective? What's actually your authentic answer here?
Yeah.
Because I don't want to get in the way of that.
Absolutely. One of the greatest lines I ever heard, maybe it was in therapy, I don't remember where I first heard this, but to start a sentence with, the story I am telling myself is ...
Yes.
Yep. The story I'm telling myself is you don't want to be friends anymore. You don't like me, whatever your story is, because that is all that it is. It is a story that we are creating based on our past experiences, beliefs, traumas, you name it, memories, all the things. We have all of these filters in which we're seeing the world. Even you and I having this conversation right now, you might say something and it passes through your filters of the world, then has to pass through my filters of the world to then get to my brain. So what you might say out of your mouth might not land
100%.
exactly the way you intended it in my own body and brain. And I mean, I feel like now we're kind of getting also into like nonviolent communication and deep listening, which is a constant practice for me, of really getting curious. And like what you said, I think it's so important to embody what it is that you preach. If you are preaching radical self-expression and somebody comes to you, like I had done to me this past year, my best friend in the entire world, we traveled the entire country together twice, and she asked for space, an end of our friendship. We haven't talked in many, many months. And I went through all the grief, the anger and the sadness and the abandonment. But ultimately, it was like, if that is what she needed to be her most authentic self, then I'm proud of her for choosing that, because that's what I would have wanted. That's what I choose for me, you know? And it is easier said than done, right? It's easier to set the boundary than to get the boundary set on you, right?
100%. And I actually would love to chat, because I feel like that's something that is often said or talked about, like, but in passing.
Yeah.
No one really talks about the fact of, because if you take someone who leans into radical self-expression and leans into like all the things that we're talking about, there's this kind of misconception of like, oh, you reach a place and then you're good and you don't get triggered and you don't sit in the shit. And that's just not the case. Like, it's just the fact that you can progressively, I don't even know if handle it better is the right word, but you have better capacity for those emotions and you can respond versus react a little bit better. So let's talk about that a little.
Yeah, I love that. I was going to say, let me ask you a question, because you're a super strong, badass workout chica. Is there a workout? Are there workouts that you do? Or let me, when you work out, is it ever not hard?
No, not unless I choose to make it not hard.
Yeah, but you do hard workouts, but you've been working out for how long? Years and years and years and years and years.
You get better at them, and as you get better at them, the situations that you put yourself in get harder.
So yeah, isn't that the funny like slap in the face almost? I love that this is what we're talking about, because it's very similar to the conversations that I end up having around confidence. When I talk about radical confidence and the difference between radical confidence and surface level confidence, radical confidence is this deeply rooted, unwavering confidence. And it doesn't mean that you don't feel like shit sometimes. It doesn't mean that you don't battle your inner critic, your limiting beliefs, your fears, your insecurities. What it means is that you are better equipped to hold space, like you said, for life being lifey, the things that end up showing up. And I know for myself, I got very tripped up when I thought I was climbing up the ladder and I reached the top of the mountain and didn't have or get or was experiencing what I thought I would experience. I was like, why did I get jibbed here? And it was this false idea, I think, that we're sold from a very young age. And I talk about this, if I can just share a little bit of my kind of college experience or growing up experience. I was put on a conveyor belt, which a lot of us are. I grew up in South Florida, and it was drilled into me from a very young age: get good grades, be involved, be the leader in the room, go to a great college, get all the internships, be super involved on campus, get a full-time job, and continue to climb the ladder to success, make the money, find the love, build the family, blah, 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 blah. And when you have those things, that's when you'll reach the pinnacle of happiness. And when I was a senior at UF and I had 2 full-time job offers, I was the kind of the spitting image of the ideal UF business student. I was involved in all these things and nominated for Hall of Fame and all of these amazing things. But I was so unhappy and I was so disconnected from myself. And I was looking down the barrel of these 2, again, great full-time jobs. There was the financial security that my parents drilled into me forever. Here was the quote unquote golden ticket to success. But why wasn't I enlivened by it? And it was understanding that it is up to us and us only to decide what happiness, success, fulfillment, joy, pleasure means. And to wrap this back to what we're talking about, it is ever evolving. What was happiness to me back then is not happiness to me now, or maybe it is, and it's bigger, it's more expanded. And I think if we could kind of summarize everything that we've talked about just so far, it's allowing that evolution to occur naturally and not try to stop it and fight it.
Yeah.
Just let yourself grow in the way that you were meant to, not in the way that you were supposed to. Get out of the story in your head.
I fucking love that we're talking about this. For starters, this is literally like the premise of this, and like why this podcast got birthed was the breaking out of expectations of others. Like I had a very different but also a very similar story, and anyone who's like gone back and listened to my early episodes like knows the whole thing, so I don't need to replay it right now. And it's like the constant thread that I hear between so many people, especially women, but everyone really, of this conveyor belt. Your conveyor belt just might look different based on what society you grew up in, your family, etc. But there's this whole like, okay, when I check the boxes, then, well, who decided the fucking boxes anyways? Like, if it wasn't you, then it's probably not going to be the thing. And then I love that you brought up, it's your own definition. What success means to me is not going to be verbatim what it means to you. There may be some common threads throughout, but it's not going to be the exact same. What means happiness to me is not going to be the same for anybody. Not even my fiance is going to have the same definition, right? And so it's being able to deeply know and understand that, and then be able to put it into practice and be happy now, rather than waiting for the next thing. I feel far too often in society we start grasping for like, okay, what's the thing that's like, what's the box that I haven't checked? Okay, let me go do that thing. Maybe that's it. No, like circling back to something that you mentioned earlier, and I love the phrase, like, I'm obsessed with the idea of constantly getting curious. Like if I am not satisfied or if I feel like something is off, okay, let's get curious about it. If I feel jealousy, let's get curious about it. If I feel like I'm comparing myself to someone, let's get curious about it. Like that is the key to what is it within me that is feeling off and therefore projecting onto someone else. And I totally just went on a tangent there.
I love it.
But I think that is so important as a society to just constantly be willing to be curious. And like you said, allowing that to go into the ever evolving and allow things to shift and change. And we've kind of touched on this, but as you are evolving and you then hold boundaries with other people or people, like there's going to be triggers that happen.
Sure.
And I talk about this all the time, but I'm like, let them happen. Like if I trigger someone, good. Because I have no power over or no control over them. And at the same time, if I'm staying true to my authentic self and they get triggered, then that is an opportunity for them to get curious. I'm going to release my control about it, right? And my expectation of any kind of particular outcome that would best serve me, because that's not the point, right? It's just stay authentic and allow them to get triggered. So circling back to like when your best friend came forward, right? I would be willing to bet, like, was there a trigger that initially happened before you processed everything to the point where you finally like were like, okay, I'm proud?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah, absolutely. And it's pretty continuous, right? Like there's still moments where I get triggered when I want to reach out about something that is happening in my life, and she set the boundary, so I know that I can't, or I choose not to. There's absolutely been the trigger, and I love that you said that within a trigger is an opportunity, and that's been a big mental shift for me. When I am triggered, what is the gifts this is giving me? Because there's always a gift in the trigger. There's always a wisdom in the fear, the insecurity, the limiting belief. I think another issue that I have with the coaching industry, with the self-development world, is the demonization of fears and insecurities and limiting beliefs. We need to get rid of them, say these affirmations, and poof, they're going to be gone. Push them out of your mind as far as you can.
Yeah, good luck if that's your goal.
Yeah. And man, imagine if we changed the relationship we had to these triggers, to these fears, from one of demonization to, no, I actually want to build a friendship with this fear, with this insecurity, with this trigger, because it's coming up for a reason. It is something to tell me. It's poking at something that makes me want to shy away from my authentic self-expression. Why? Why is that? And I know for me with this specific, relationship, it was the abandonment wound, that I'm too much and it can't be held, and it's easier for people to walk away from me because I'm too much. And I like to over communicate, and sometimes I'm overly expressive and loud, and I get to sit with that as mine. My trigger is mine and mine only to own and to navigate. It doesn't mean I have to do it alone, but maybe this person, and in this case, she wasn't the person to sit through it with. You lean on other resources. But it's a beautiful and very empowering mindset shift of the triggers that I experience in the world. Instead of pointing the finger and the blame outside of myself, which is so easy to do, because it's hard to look at ourselves in the mirror when we're not feeling our best. We're not feeling, we're not feeling our best. But to do it anyway is brave, it's courageous, and it builds a level of self-love and self-trust that is radical confidence. That is true radical confidence. Not when shit's easy, which is what I started to say with Michael Singer. He always says life is happening. It's a happening world. That's what he says. It's a happening world. It's always been a happening world. We're not special because somebody in our life dies, because somebody breaks up with us, because somebody walks out, because we lose a job. We're not special. This has been happening for all of eternity. Yep. And for us to think that we can only and should only be happy and good and in love with life when things are flowing, when our friends want to be around us, and our relationships are working out and our jobs are working out, that's an exhausting way to live. Yeah. To constantly have to pick up the pieces of your entire life when something heavy happens. And I think that there's space for that. But anyway, long answer to your question.
No, I
yes,
love it.
I was triggered. And like I said, I continue to get triggered, and I continue to come back to the gift that the trigger is giving me, because it's allowing me to learn a deeper part of myself.
Oh, I love that so much. And that's such a beautiful and needed reframe of the gift of the trigger. And right, because we grow when we go through things like triggers and the uncomfortable. And I love that you gave me the long answer, right? Because it brought in the fact that there's beauty in being able to hold the duality of situations and emotions. So feel the fear and do it anyways. Feel the fear and look for the lesson within it, right?
Yeah.
Like there's all these things. In fact, my sign that this is something that I'm supposed to go for, like when I first started this podcast, was feeling a whole lot of fucking fear and being excited about it, right? Like it's this nerve-sided kind of feeling. And if I'm not feeling some level of fear, I'm not going big enough. I'm letting someone else dictate, or I'm playing small. Like there's something underneath there if I am not feeling any of the fear. So I love that you brought that up. And I love that we ended up talking about like a friend breakup, because I feel like all too often this kind of stuff is talked about as far as like a romantic breakup.
I
right?
got plenty of that too if you want it, but
and like the friendship breakups,
they're real, man.
They're real, and it just isn't talked about a lot.
Yeah. It hurts just as
but
much.
as you grow, like we're talking about one instance, but for anyone listening, like there are going to be the ones that are kind of the deeper, because it's someone who you were so close with, and like you're gonna lose people as you grow and evolve. And it's trusting, right? Like you said, even in the hard times, being able to trust, surrender, and know that it sounds so cheesy, but it is going to all work out for the best. Like the people who are meant to come with you will come with you.
Yeah.
As you let people go, it creates the space for others who are meant to come in. Like it's back to that duality. At the same time, if anyone's listening and like someone's going through like a loss of a family member or a friend, like don't tell them that everything's going to work out as it's meant to.
Probably not
like,
the thing to say.
I had so many people say something along those lines when my dad passed, and I was like, I will punch you if you don't back up from me.
And it's all like in good love. And I think I think this is an interesting conversation if we can go here for a second of just what do you say to somebody who's grieving? Because I was never taught that. Were you taught that? I was never taught. There's no rule
I
book.
figured it out afterwards.
Yeah.
There actually is a book.
There's a book. Awesome.
There is, but I didn't discover it until afterwards. It's called There's No Good Card for This.
Oh, perfect.
And it's 2 psychotherapists who went through grief who wrote this book and developed like a greeting card. So there is, but like almost no one has heard of that book.
I never heard of that. And I sure as shit didn't know how to comfort somebody, show my support for somebody who is grieving. And again, grief is such a broad term. Yes, it could be the loss of a loved one, but we grieve constantly as a society. And
I
think
grieve the loss of yourself when something like that, whether it's loss of a loved one, loss of a friendship, like you're not just grieving the thing or the person you lost, you're also grieving the version of yourself that was prior to that loss. And you're grieving the future version of you that you envisioned with that person or situation in your life.
100%. Beautifully said. Yeah. And I too had a lot of comments of like, everything happens for a reason. Although I know that, and you know that when you're out of it, when you're in it, that's the last thing that you want to hear. And I think if there's anything that the grief experience, losing my brother, has taught me, it's how to sit with people in heavy emotions without needing to fix it.
Yeah.
And that is, again, I think such an empowering gift you can give yourself, because there are just certain things in life where there aren't words to say. There are not words to say. There's not supposed to be words to say, because this transcends words. This goes deeper than words. This is energy. When I lost Zachary, there weren't words because it was energetic. It was emotion, and learning to sit with those emotions has allowed me to sit with others through those emotions without feeling the need to say, quote unquote, the right thing, which there's not the right thing because everybody is so different. And it's like that quote, we can only meet others to the depths that we first met ourselves.
Yes.
And what an opportunity that we have to meet ourselves deeply so that we can meet the world deeply. And through that, allowing us to have more compassion, more empathy, more understanding for what people are going through. And I think even with my breakup, which was a romantic breakup, and my friend breakup that all happened in this last year, I don't know if I would have been able to navigate it with the level of compassion and love for the other person that I did without losing my brother, because I was able to meet myself with that level of compassion. And so I just think that's such an interesting thing, an important topic to come back to, is how do you hold space for somebody who's grieving? And it's being okay, being triggered by their emotions. Because I feel like that's why people squirm and want to say the right thing. It's because I'm so triggered by this grief, because maybe it awakens immense grief within myself. And I don't know, I've never held this for myself before, so I sure as shit don't know how to hold it for you.
Yeah.
But if I could sit with that and allow my emotions also to come up freely. And again, maybe there's time and place, like if somebody just loses somebody, like maybe don't start crying about somebody that you also lost, right?
Yeah. Don't compare it to your hamster that you lost at 4 years old.
Yeah.
But no, I love that. And you're right. There's like this societal conditioning, and I haven't yet really dove into like where it comes from, of just being uncomfortable with emotions. I think it goes like back generations. And so if someone's listening and they're like, okay, I know I'm not comfortable when someone starts crying or lashing out or whatever, but no, I don't feel grief. Take a second to sit with yourself. Like, your body keeps the score. It will let you know. So even, because I know prior to losing my dad, I don't think I even recognized what that kind of feeling was. But afterwards, I could be like, oh, I felt this before. Just not quite to this like level, but that like you'll feel it somewhere in your body. For everyone, it's a little bit different. For me, like I'm kind of pointing to like xiphoid. What is this actually called non-anatomically? Like the bottom of your rib cage.
Oh, yeah. Sternum.
Yeah, like the bottom of your sternum.
Yeah. It's like, oh,
is
shit.
like where
Yeah.
I can like deeply feel. And like after I lost my dad, it felt like a gaping hole. And I could recognize like, oh, I've felt this before. I just didn't know what it was. I just knew that I was uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I wanted to get rid of it. And then you, like you said, you can almost see it and feel it in other people around you when, from that moment on, not even just when you're in it. So I love that we went there as far as like how to better hold space for people and show up for others when they're going through a hard time, and like taking that same thing and holding more compassion for yourself when you're going through a hard time. And something else that I've seen you post about at some point, I don't remember when, I'm terrible with timelines, is the idea that comparison is the biggest form of self-abandonment. Because we're talking about like you can only meet others as far as you can meet yourself. And I think part of that is being able to lean into, and when you notice yourself comparing, taking that as an opportunity to get curious. I would love to hear you talk about what that has looked like, or any tips for someone who keeps catching themselves in like a comparison or imposter syndrome.
Yeah. I'm excited to answer that question, and I just want to share a quick resource for grief.
Yes.
The book, it's called The Wild Edge of Sorrow. It's phenomenal. I'm about 3/4 of the way through. It's actually in my backpack over there. It has been such a gift. I just wanted to put that out there if somebody is grieving. And it's all about rituals for renewal around grief. And it's so well written. It's taken me so long to read because I keep underlying like every other sentence.
Those are like the best kind of books,
so
and
good.
it just takes so long. I'll grab links and I'll get this in the show notes, like the grief resources.
It's really, really great. And it's something that he says, I'll just share real quickly. Grief and love are sisters woven together from the beginning of time. And I'm so grateful for the grief that I've experienced. Again, losing my brother, friendships, relationships, whatever it is, old identities. And I love that you said that, grieving past versions of ourselves. I'm so grateful for it because the more I've allowed myself to grieve, the more deeply I've been able to love.
100%.
And even though, you love deeper, you have the opportunity to get hurt deeper. I wouldn't take it back for the world. So just a really
actually,
great
before
resource.
you jump into the comparison, because I want to highlight something there, because I think you've probably noticed the same. Like as you go through these different forms of grief and you do dive more into yourself, the friendships and the relationships that do stay are so much deeper, and you almost can't put words into the shift that happens. You just know that it went hand in hand with working through grief.
Yep.
And that has been time and time again. And not even just relationships with friends, but like client work.
Yeah.
And like they notice it too. And it's mind-boggling. So for anyone who's like maybe a people pleaser and tries to like shift, like if that's the mindset shift you need to like work on yourself and be okay with diving into this stuff, like it will help everyone around you in the most magical ways.
Totally. When we peel back the layers of take off all the masks that we often wear, we're these little bundles and balls of love that come into this world wanting to give love and wanting to receive love. And over time, I call it the paper mache effect. There's these layers of paper mache that get put over our soul. Act a certain way, don't do this, blah, 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 blah. Be this identity, have this belief. And we end up being adults, still that bundle of love, but with layers and layers and layers of hardened paper mache around the truth of who it is that we are. And like we talked about earlier, when you go through something traumatic, like a loss of somebody, especially, I don't know if yours was sudden, the losing of your dad.
It's like a 3 to 6 month thing.
Sorry. Yeah, it's so shocking to the system. My brother was here one day and he was gone the next. And that it was like a drill went straight through the layers of the paper mache, and all of it got cracked open. All of it fell away. And here I was, just this bundle of love, wanting to give and receive love. And the people who were able to meet me there were the ones who truly loved me unconditionally. And a lot of people fell away, and it was scary. It was scary, but also necessary for me to truly understand for the first time in my life how much I deserved to be loved and how unconditionally I deserved to be loved. And it was hard because some of the people that I thought would love me unconditionally couldn't and didn't and walked out of my life. And so many other people showed up in that process like you talked about. So anyway, shall I move to our comparison question?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And I do love that you brought that up because that's been the constant that I've seen both with my own, like losing my dad and everything, of like who shows up and who doesn't, surprises and delights you. Like by the end, right? It's crazy. It almost like adds to the layers of grief because now you also have to grieve some friendships that are lost, but then some others blossom that might not have ever blossomed without that experience.
Totally.
So yeah. Okay. Comparison.
Yeah. This is a grief podcast, baby. So the quote that you're speaking to is comparison is one of the greatest acts of self-violence. That's what I posted, and I believe very deeply. Comparison is something that I have navigated my whole life, and I know I'm not alone in that. Yeah. Again, we live in a society that from a very young age, we're pinned against each other, whether that's in school, going out for different positions. And it has heightened in a way being in Austin since I've moved here, which was about almost 4 years ago. I now live in a city with a lot of other coaches, a lot of other badass, specifically women, that are beautiful and smart and talented and grounded and feminine and all of these things. And I've been triggered consistently being here, meeting the parts of myself that don't feel like they're good enough, beautiful enough, smart enough, talented enough, blah, 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 blah. And it has been a beautiful and challenging dance to sit with these parts of me. And at times it's been very exhausting. It's kind of like I have this kicking, screaming child within me that is constantly throwing a temper tantrum and requires pretty regular nurturing. And like I'm not a parent, but I imagine any parent, there's moments where you're like, what the actual fuck? Like, I don't know if I can do this anymore.
Yeah.
This is extremely exhausting. I don't know what to do to console this child. And I've definitely experienced that as I've learned to reparent parts of myself. And this part of myself specifically, her name's Lil D, baby Gert. And so how do I navigate it? I think first and foremost, especially, and again, Austin's the only like bigger city I've ever lived in. I'm from South Florida, but I kind of grew up in a little suburb. But I came here and I was like, oh my God, there's, in addition to social media and seeing people from all over the world that we wouldn't have otherwise seen before, right? The playing field, if you will, is so vast. It's almost infinite. Mm-hmm. And things that have really, really helped me is being extremely disciplined and mindful about what noise I allow into my life and my world. And when I first came here, I was so excited, honeymoon phase. I did everything. I went everywhere. I wanted to be friends with everybody. And I didn't realize the energy leakage that was occurring because of that. And I think there's a necessary learning process, right? Like you got to throw spaghetti at the wall a little bit and see what sticks. Yeah. And I had to go try a bunch of things to see what resonated. But as I started to become more in tune and grounded with who I am and what feels aligned for me and what feels enjoyable and pleasurable for me and exciting for me, I had to draw some hard boundaries with myself, which are oftentimes the hardest boundaries to honor.
100%.
Which is what noise do I want to allow in, and getting curious about why I'm saying yes to certain things. And this is still a practice for me. Sometimes I was actually telling a friend on the way over here, like she was like, when are we catching up this week? I'm like, I honestly have no time, I feel like, to catch up this week because I said yes to a couple things that probably wouldn't have said yes to. So I'm always working on that, but getting really clear on what I'm saying yes to and why. And being very in tune with where my energy is and how my body feels when I leave certain people or an environment. So yeah, cutting out the noise, and And when I do find myself comparing myself to the other women, and I'm surrounded by women because I run a women's community with hundreds of women in it that are beautiful and badass and warriors and all of these different things, I like to ask myself the question, what are they inspiring me to see within myself? Or how are they inspiring me to call myself up? Because it's not, when I think about comparison, I think about jealousy, right? I'm comparing myself because I'm jealous of something they have. And then when I think about jealousy, well, what's under jealousy? Oftentimes it's fear. Fear that I don't have that thing, fear that I'm going to be missing out on that thing. And so if I'm fearful of something, A, is that maybe a logical fear, or is that just a construct? And B, what can I do about it? Is there something that I want to do about it? And so again, here comes the curiosity thing, and I call it the curiosity, like pull out your curiosity glasses or goggles and put them on and be the detective a little bit of your own life, of the comparison. And I'll share one more thing on the act of self-violence. Every time we compare ourselves to somebody else, I don't always think it's a bad thing. I think there's a lot of beauty in comparison. I think when we use it in a way to inspire us and call us up, there's a lot of power in it. But when we compare ourselves in a way that tears us down, we can get ourselves really stuck in a shame spiral. Yeah. And we are doubting the divinity, the magic that we came here to impart on the world. And for me personally, I can't think of anything more sad and more self-violent than doubting your gifts and magic in the world, that you are not special, that you are not here for a bigger purpose, that you aren't here to make a bigger impact, that you don't have the same, not exactly the same, but the same divinity. We all come with the same divinity. We come from the same place. I really believe that. And when we compare ourselves, it's doubting God, the universe, the divine, whatever it is that you believe in. And so, it's taken a lot of discipline to come back to that. I call it my inner bestie. I have this inner bestie who hypes me up. I have a very loud inner critic. And then I have this inner bestie that hypes me up when I don't feel like I can hype myself up. She is the reminder when I'm comparing myself of like, that's great. That woman is great. That person is great. Celebrate them for their, celebrate them for their greatness. Celebrate them for what they're teaching you and showing you. And I want to remind you of how incredible you are too. There's so much there.
I love that.
Yeah.
So much. Yeah, I was like, ooh, I want to highlight that. Ooh, I want to highlight that. Okay. So much. I love that you differentiated the like comparison as a way to call yourself up versus comparison. Like anyone listening knows exactly what that means. Like as soon as you start comparing and you can almost feel yourself kind of go inward a little bit when you do that. And so exactly like you said, like switching it to a curiosity letting that inner bestie come out and kind of hype you up. And circling back to something that you said earlier, like recognizing where you're putting yourselves in situations where you do that more frequently. So auditing your environment, the people you're around, all of that stuff, like you nailed it. And I say this all the time of like, how do you feel when you left that person or that situation? Because if it wasn't better than when you arrived, we need to reevaluate that. And is this actually a person or a situation that it has a place in your life? Or do you keep putting yourself in environments that trigger that negative comparison, that self-abandonment?
I love the auditing.
Yeah. I think it's so important to do. Like you said, it's what we bring into our lives and like that noise, right, that you called it, that is such a game changer for us. Like your environment is stronger than your willpower. Like I'm sorry, but it is. Yep. And so needing the importance of auditing that and saying like, hey, this noise is serving me. Hey, this noise is not. And I'm going to hold a boundary and I'm going to say no to those things.
I love that. Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about this, and it's something I talk about in my program. We think equal to our environment.
Yep.
And I love that you said environment oftentimes is stronger than willpower, because it influences everything around us, our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions, and having the discipline to, here's another thing too, to recognize, and this kind of loops back to what we talked about in the beginning of the podcast, the ever-evolving nature of who you are, the environment that you've been in, even though it's been safe, familiar, and comfortable for this present version of you or a past version of you, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the environment for the future version of you. And the only way you can know and make that discernment is by being present with yourself and embodied and checking in with your body, with your breath, of how am I feeling and what is alive within me in this situation. Like, I've been so present with you, and what's present in my body right now is just like, there's this weight, and I don't mean weight like a heaviness. There's a weight like a rootedness in this moment with you, in this conversation, which tells me I'm safe, I'm comfortable, I'm able to freely express myself. There's not a bunch of chatter up in my brain right now as we're talking. The words that are coming out of my mouth are actually flowing from my heart, not from my mind. And these are embodied, these are signs of an embodiment that feels really good to me.
Yeah.
And without that awareness of self, without that presence of self, we can get caught in this thought-feeling loop, which Dr. Joe Dispenza also talks about. What I think is and ends up being what I feel. What I feel is ends up being what I think. And we create this chemical cocktail that we become accustomed to. It becomes the homeostasis of our being. And so, to give an example of this, it's like, if I'm continuously thinking negative, sad thoughts, then I'm feeling anxiousness, sadness, depression in my body. Then it cycles back up where I continue thinking negative thoughts, because the body and the mind doesn't know good or bad. It knows familiar, unfamiliar, safe, unsafe, comfortable, uncomfortable. And if you become comfortable with sad thoughts, thinking happy thoughts is actually what becomes unsafe for your body because it's unfamiliar. How fucking fucked up is that?
Yeah,
right? So
it's baffling.
It's so
but that's
flipped.
like all the research points to that. And when I say all the research, a lot of it is in like, why do people stay in domestic violence situations, or why do people even get in there in the first place? And it's like, we don't need to go down that rabbit hole, but it does have to do with what feels comfortable. What does your inner self consider quote unquote safe, even if it isn't actually a safe environment.
Totally.
It's the normalcy of it. It's what your nervous system has become accustomed to.
And I love that you said nervous system. It is what your nervous system has come accustomed to. Because I could look logically, and you hear this a lot to your example, people who are in domestic violent relationships, situations, logically, they're like, I know this is unsafe. I know I need to get out. But why don't they, right? And again, this is very loaded. Like, there's so many individual, reasons and circumstances, and I'm not speaking from experience here. But the fact that our nervous system, which rules our entire life, will dictate whether I stay or I go, because that is my tie to my survival. And so how this relates to what we're talking about and staying in environments that are no longer serving us, and why that can be so challenging, and the importance of moving out of relationships that are no longer serving us, is really checking in with, is this a habitual environment, thought process, nervous system response, or am I fully present and, like we talked about, embodied in this moment? And can I tell the difference?
Yeah, it's actually was a fairly recent realization for me, that because, like, yes, I used the example. So domestic violence, a little bit of an extreme example, but I feel like a lot of us have at least some kind of codependency in some area of our life. And so it was a recent thing for me to actually read a book on codependency and kind of see the patterns and be like, oh, there are certain things that are just more habitual. Okay, let's get curious about that. What's underneath it? Where can I dive into myself more and detach the need for an external validation or whatever it is in that situation?
Yeah.
So, okay, I feel like we legitimately could talk
Probably
for
forever.
So I want to give time though for you to kind of shout out like what you do, what you have going on. Like, yeah, I kind of know some of the answers, but I feel like you have so much that I would love for you to just tell the listeners, like, how can they work with you? Like, what do you have coming up?
I love that. And I love that you waited till the end to ask. So I'm an ownership coach and a self-mastery mentor is what I call myself. And my passion is inspiring people to own their shit. And that is very loaded, right?
Yeah.
It's very loaded. I do that in a couple different ways. I do that through movement, right? I'm a trainer and a coach of unconventional movement. And I lead my incredible women's group, Project Warrior Women, or Warrior Women ATX as we're known here in Austin. And I also do a lot of self-mastery work, and I do that online. My business is in a big shifting point right now, to be fully transparent. I don't know when this will be released, but maybe I'll be left less in a shifting point when this comes out. But there's a couple different ways. So I do monthly master classes on all different types of topics, all around owning your shit. An example would be navigating the people pleaser, building a relationship with the inner bestie, setting boundaries, navigating triggers, you name it. Just kind of like what comes up. So monthly master classes. I do have a course called the Radical Confidence Blueprint, which is an introductory course to self-mastery and really gives you the foundation. I walk you through my Own Your Shit method, which is 3 phases to building that unwavering, unshakable, deep, radical confidence. I have a really great email list. I think so. I brag. I love writing emails to my list. That's a great free way to connect with me and learn. And I also have a podcast. There's 2 seasons. I haven't released an episode in quite a while. We're getting back there, but there's 2 really great seasons that are out that can be listened to. And I will share as well, one last thing is I'm going to Colombia in July. I'm leading a retreat called Live Out Loud. It is a co-ed retreat that is going to be in Santa Marta, Colombia, July 15th to the 21st. And it is all about play, because one of my value when I teach self-mastery work is doing it through the lens of play, because oftentimes this work can feel very heavy. Inner child work can be heavy, right? Self-mastery can be heavy. So how do we do that through the lens of play? And so that's what the retreat is all about, is self-mastery work through the lens of play. What does that look like and feel like? And you can catch me at Hyrox. I travel around the country with Hyrox, an international fitness race, and I'm the start line Emcee. So I hype your ass up at the start line. So lots of ways, and Instagram, of course.
Yeah. And I will drop links in the show notes. Definitely make sure to check her out. I can personally vouch for I get your emails and I love them.
Thanks,
and I
man.
also, Colombia is one of my favorite countries, so I'm so stoked that y'all are doing it there. It's going to be beautiful. Definitely check that out. Just a couple rapid fire questions
Please.
to wrap it
Bring
up.
on.
So, and these tend to not be so rapid fire, but we'll roll.
We'll try. I'll try. I'm long-winded, so I will short-wind myself.
I am too, so I never fault anyone for it. So what's something this year that you have coming up that you feel that fear and excitement about?
The growth of Warrior Women. We are really stepping into expansion.
Okay.
Our goal is 5 cities, to be in 5 cities at the end of 2025, which comes with a whole lot of other shit. I am terrified and so fucking excited that I'm up at night.
Oh, that's so
pumped
awesome.
about who do I need to talk to?
Yeah.
And I'm so lit up by where we're going.
Oh, that's amazing. And actually, I'll take a pause here for a second to say, so we're recording this live. So I'm not in Scottsdale recording. Like, I'm normally walking around my neighborhood on voice notes, chatting with the birds in the background. We're actually in a studio in Austin. And the last 3 times I've been in Austin, I've dropped into Warrior Women with friends of mine. And it is so fun and so empowering. So I'm so pumped for that to expand into other cities.
Maybe we'll come to Scottsdale.
Yeah.
Hey.
It's a great space for it. Okay. Next question. Favorite place you've ever traveled and why?
Oh, this is hard. I think anyone who knows me is going to be like, oh, it's Costa Rica, because I love Costa Rica and I go 1 to 2 times a year. So I do love Costa Rica. But my favorite place I've ever traveled was Israel. I just have such beautiful memories of the whole country. I went in 2012 when I was 18 years old and knew nothing of the world. And it just left such a beautiful, deep impact in my heart, connecting with my heritage. I'm grieving and hurting so badly for what's happening over in Israel and Palestine right now. And I just have a lot of beautiful memories of being in Israel, specifically this little area called Sfat. It's like their art district. It's super beautiful and artsy, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful part of the world.
Oh, I love that so much. Okay. I have a feeling, but I don't want to like assume I know the answer to this next one. So what's one thing that you do see, whatever, like what's one like immediately takes you to your inner child? Like what do you do when you need to do that?
Dancing, wiggling. Yeah.
I was about to say, I feel like it's going to be wiggle.
It's the wiggle.
If y'all have not, like for sure, check out her Instagram. Like, yeah.
The 1 minute wiggle.
The 1 minute wiggle.
100%.
It so works too.
It totally works.
So if anyone's listening, they're like, what the hell are they talking about? Literally, just stand up and wiggle your ass for like one minute and see how you feel.
1 minute. That's it. That's all it takes. It ends up turning into a lot longer than a minute, but all you need is a minute to start. But yeah, that will always immediately drop me into also just my body, not even maybe necessarily at first my inner child, but just to get into my body.
Without meaning for it to be a somatic practice most of the time.
It's wonderful.
So go twerk for a minute, see what happens.
Life changer, life hack, honestly.
Yeah. Danielle, thank you so much for coming on. This has been a fucking blast. Definitely check out the show notes. Hit her up, y'all. All right. Catch you next time.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Boom, boom.
Sweet.
I just got to click
the thing.
Record button again.
I actually was looking, because obviously I was like scrolling your page, like making sure like, okay, I don't think I need a ton of bullet points. I didn't get to most of them.
I figured.
But just having stuff and it says like, oh, this retreat looks fun. I fucking love Colombia. And like it's one of my words. So as soon as you said that, I was like,
what you doing in July? How do I click this? I clicked it, but nothing happened, and it's still going. Should I click it again?
the stop button or the
I think I'm just supposed to click record again. Or do I click stop?
maybe question mark?